Hey guys, welcome back to Reserved Investments on YouTube. So today I want to talk about collecting categories that are in a bear market or a sleeper market where prices are pretty much remaining flat for most of the items in these categories, unless again, if we're talking about the top 1 to 10% of the market in question, where a lot of quote scarce, historic, or rare items are being bought and sold repeatedly by a lot of well-to-do and wealthy investors. Now, most of you that watch this channel for the long haul, you guys will see me do videos where I talk about 5 collecting categories that are losing steam and will one day become extinct, whether it's 10 years out, 20 years out, 30 years out, or 40 years out. This is not one of those videos. Again, all these markets will come back into vogue at some point in the future. The question is just when. Well, I can answer that for some of these particular collecting categories. Others I can't. I can just give you pretty much an approximation as to what the market's doing and what it's going to do in the future. But I just want to state that before we go any further, if you remember, I did a video on investing in antiques and collectibles where I talk about lesson 1. And lesson 1 is simply the antique market is cyclical, the collectibles market is linear. Right now, as I sit here and record this video at the beginning of 2020, there's a lot of collecting categories, and I've spent numerous hours talking about this on this channel, that are in a massive speculative bubble. Markets like graded video games, vintage video games, certain segments of the Magic the Gathering collectibles market, and the Pokemon market. Those markets, in my opinion, are under the guise of a massive speculative bubble at present time. Those particular collecting categories, as a result, at some point, a lot of the prices in those particular markets are going to become lower and or are going to stabilize. The same thing is starting to happen in the vintage comic book realm. And there's a lot of people for the longest time thought that every single Silver Age and Bronze Age and Golden Age key would continue to rise in value. Well, if you want a little bit of a lesson here, go look at the value of Amazing Fantasy 15 across all grades, graded or not. That comic book is starting to weaken on the secondary market. Now, to be fair, Amazing Fantasy 15, which ushered in the first appearance of Spider-Man, is not a rare comic book. A lot of those books, even in the lower end grades, all the way up, even till you get to about fine or very fine condition, that book can be found quite easily through dealers and the like. Now, if you want a 9.2, 9.4, 9.6 copy of that book, it's going to be very hard to find because you're talking about the top end of the market for an item like that. But overall, Amazing Fantasy 15 is not a rare comic book by any means. Neither is a lot of your Bronze Age comic books or late Silver Age comic books. These items were printed in mass and they were pretty much hoarded. In 1970, when the Overstreet comic book price guide was first produced, that's when the first Overstreet guide hit the market, a lot of people started speculating in that market. That's why there's a lot of people that don't realize just how many books like X-Men 94 or Giant Size X-Men 1 are out there on the market because they were hoarded in mass. The same thing can be said for Amazing Spider-Man 129, which is the first appearance of Punisher, and even, to a lesser extent, Incredible Hulk 181, which was the first full appearance of Wolverine. There's a lot of books on those on the marketplace. The reason why they sell for fairly high prices, guys, is simply because of demand, thanks to third-party grading entering the market, and also Marvel's spectacular handling of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I don't think prices for a lot of those books are going to go up indefinitely over the next 10 years. It can't happen. Again, some of those books are already starting to weaken. I could do a whole video on that if you guys want me to. Let me know in the comments, and I gladly will go through. I'll even pull out my GP analysis data, and we'll have a conversation about the vintage comic book marketplace if you need me to. I did one video on it already. It's on this channel somewhere because it was one of the first videos that I did. Now, back to today's point. We're going to be talking about bear markets. Now, most of these markets are in the antique side of the trade. They are not in the collectible side of the trade because, again, antiques are cyclical. Collectibles overall are linear. It takes a very long time for a collectibles market to prove itself, become established, and possibly transfer into being a valid antiques market. Most collectible categories die out, either go endangered and or extinct, or become curiosities long before they become valuable antiques and or sought after antiques. The simple definition of an antique is simply an item that is 100 years of age or older. It makes no claims to value and or demand on the secondary market. Please remember that, guys. The term antique simply means an item that is 100 years of age or older. There are no claims being made over rarity, demand, or value when you use the term antique. You can have an item that is technically not even collected anymore that meets the definition of an antique. That doesn't make it rare or valuable on the secondary market. The same thing is true when we talk about collectibles. The only parameter needed to call something a collectible is it has to sell for more money on the secondary marketplace than what the original manufacturer's suggested retail price was for that item when it was first created and or made. So that's a very important distinguishing factor. If you go to the store and you buy a factory sealed copy of the latest video game, it is not considered a collectible. The item, if you go to sell it on the secondary market, you're going to be competing with Walmart, Target, and Amazon. That is not the definition of a collectible. Now, when we start talking about mass-produced scarcity versus organic collectible, you can argue that some of the Amiibos and Funko Pops out there were manufactured to be quote-unquote rare for all the Timmies and the Poindexters out there who don't understand the concept. So I'm not going to talk too much about that in this video. What I am going to talk about, though, are 5 markets that are in a bear market at present time on the antique side of the trade. First up, we got to talk about collectible coins. Collectible coins and collectible currency, which is number 2 on this list, ironically, are 2 of my favorite markets when I invest and or diversify in the antiques trade. Now, a lot of people ask me, Sean, you know, I look around at coin conventions and the like, and I see only old guys. I don't see young guys coming into this trade. What do you mean? The coin collecting marketplace is dying. Everybody knows that. Same thing for currency. Nobody cares about that antiquated currency that nobody uses anymore. We're all hip and young. We're using Apple cards, Visa Gold cards, Platinum cards, and the like. Nobody pulls out change and pays somebody in cash anymore. That's obsolete. We have PayPal now. Well, ironically, guys, you're dead wrong. That market has a market cap of $3.5 billion to $4 billion every year. What that means is it's one of the most sophisticated and largest markets in the greater antiques and collectibles trade, and it's only really dwarfed by 2 known markets that I can think of at present time. The first would be the market for antique furniture, because when you get into that market, there is a lot of moving pieces in that particular market. So there's a lot of people that are paying, that you don't realize, $100,000 to $200,000 for a piece of antique furniture that the news media and auction houses really aren't advertising as record-breaking sales. Number 2, the other market that would dwarf the coin collecting market is the art market, because you have people in that market that are multi-billionaires that are paying $400 million for a Da Vinci or an original piece of fine art. That market kills the coin collecting marketplace, just because if pretty much one of those $400 million paintings is sold in a year, that pretty much adds to the market cap of that particular collecting category. So those 2 categories do come close to the rare coin marketplace when we talk about it. But ironically, what nobody really wants to mention is there are coins that sell for multi-millions of dollars. I think one of the highest prices paid for a coin, I think in the last year, was $7 or $8 million. There isn't a comic book out there that has ever hit that amount on the auction block. There is never a vintage toy or a video game out there that has hit $1 million as of yet, guys. So do not devalue or overlook the market for coins and currency. It is very important because it is pretty much a financial history of the United States. And if you're out there and you live in Hong Kong or the United Kingdom or other parts of Europe or Japan or wherever, those markets for world coins and ancient coins is growing. It's not shrinking. So that market will always be there. Now, what's my point? Well, coins right now are in a bear market. And the reason for that is because coins have an inverse relationship to the economy as a whole and the financial markets as a whole. So what that means is when you see all these record gains happening in Wall Street and the economic boom that we're currently experiencing, with this being a 10-year bull market, coins in their nature have an inverse relationship with that particular market. So what they're in a bear market at present time because a lot of coin collectors, speculators, and investors, they're throwing all their money at the stock market. Now, there is one exception to this rule. The top 1 to 5% of the rare coin marketplace is pretty much populated by billionaires and multimillionaires. That market has been on fire for years. In fact, if you have the money and the means, and you know the rare coin marketplace, and you also understand the risks and how to grade and accurately predict market trends, if you go into the rare coin marketplace and you spend $50,000 or $100,000 on one coin, that coin literally in just 5 years can literally triple or quadruple in value. Now, that's not the commonplace thing to happen. That's not the norm, but it is also something that does occur. I did a video where I talk about ethical insider trading in the antiques and collectibles trade, and I use coin collecting as an example in that video because it fits the purpose. The market for rare coins is always on fire. The problem is you have a lot of people coming into the rare coin marketplace and even just the investment grade coin marketplace, which is pretty much coins in investment grade condition of $1,000 or more in value. That particular market is populated by a lot of people that don't know what they're doing. And those type of people are very dangerous in that trade because it is a sophisticated market. Again, if you want to enter the rare coin marketplace or even the investment grade marketplace, you don't know what you're doing, please stick to dealers. Auction bidding is going to cost you dearly in that particular marketplace, in my opinion. Now, a lot of people are asking me, well, Sean, you said that it's in a bear market. When's it going to rebound? Well, that's very easy. Next financial crisis. Every financial crisis, people that invest in precious metals, silver, gold, come out of the woodwork and they start putting money into a lot of these precious metals and commodities. A portion of their holdings are also usually invested in investment grade and or rare coins as a way to diversify. That's when that market catches fire. If you look at the Great Recession towards 2008, 2009, 2010, and 2011, precious metal prices, mainly gold and silver, started to escalate upward. That year, in 2012, was also a banner year for coins. If you don't believe me, go back and look at the numbers. You can Google market caps for the rare coin marketplace if you don't believe me. Those years were very profitable for a lot of dealers and auction houses because the greater economy was in a recession. That's pretty much when that market goes up in value. Now, the next bear market that we're going to look at is the market for paper currency, money. Now, what I'm talking about in this marketplace is collectible U.S. currency that was made before the year 1923. These are often referred to as large size banknotes. So if you Google that term, you're going to get lists of currency descriptions and pictures of some of the most beautiful pieces of art our government ever produced to be used as currency. Some of these particular items right now are in such a depressed bear market that literally back in 2008, 2009, you would be paying double the price to own some of these treasures. Now, a lot of people look at me and they go, well, Sean, do you really see that market turning around? The answer is absolutely. It goes in predictable cycles. Here's the thing that you have to understand about the currency collectibles marketplace, though. Currency is not like coins. It's not made of silver. It's not made of gold. So a lot of precious metal collectors, investors, and speculators, for that reason, don't like to own it. However, history buffs, people that like to study the financial history of the United States, and pretty much everybody I know with a finance degree, loves collecting currency as well as coins. That market is not going away. That market will rebound again in another 5 to 10 years. It'll come back in full force. It'll do its thing, and then it will go quietly back into the sleeper mode that it's in right now until it's awakened again in another 5, 10, or 20 years. Because that's the way that market works. What brought new life into that market was the advent of third-party grading guys. Believe it or not, coin grading came into existence in the 1980s. Currency and paper money grading didn't become a thing until around 2006, 2007. So it took many decades later for a lot of the third-party grading companies to catch up and go, hey, not only can we grade coins, we can authenticate and grade U.S. currency as well. And now the market's catching fire for world banknotes. So if you're a Chinese collector of your own nation's currency and or coins, you can go back and you could start to grade and collect graded Chinese currency from 100 years before or 150 years before. And you could put together a valuable collection. So the worldwide collecting marketplaces are starting to notice the value of some of this stuff, and they're taking an interest. So that's an interesting aspect that's occurring in that particular marketplace, the marketplace for graded paper money. Now, the third market I want to talk about is art glass. Those of you that have seen the upstairs of my house, and I occasionally shoot videos from that room as well, there's a lot of art glass and different valuable pieces of Tiffany glass and the like on display. I am a huge fan of Tiffany art glass. I like, for contemporary artists, Dale Chihilly, and a lot of the works that these particular artists bring to the table. Well, that market right now, especially for vintage art glass, is pretty much in a sleeping mode. I don't want to use the term bear for this, even though it does fit, but ultimately, the art glass market goes through predictable cycles. It's in a cycle right now that pretty much hit after the Great Recession. So right around 2008, 2009, 2010, the market for vintage art glass, in most cases, pretty much went soft. Well, it's still soft right now, and you probably have a couple of years here before it starts to pick up, assuming we don't have another recession or another economic downturn. That would be detrimental to that market, but that market will never die. The market for Tiffany glass is not going anywhere. People are not going to stop collecting Tiffany glass or a lot of this other rare glass by Gallet and the likes. That stuff is pretty much considered the mainstay of the antiques trade, and it will always be coveted. It doesn't matter what future generations collect or what past generations collect, because it's considered a true art form. It's a decorative art. There's a lot of people where if you go to the Philadelphia Art Museum, if you go to any major metropolitan city and you go into their art museum, they have a section devoted to art glass, vintage art glass, antique art glass, and contemporary art glass. Collectors and people love that particular item, and they love owning it. So even the most expensive pieces always find a market. In fact, one of the best places to park money in the antiques and collectibles trade, outside of some of these other markets I'm mentioning, is in the top 1% of the art glass market, meaning Tiffany lamps and the like, items of that nature. Now, some people will disagree with me stating that, and I would never ever encourage a novice collector, speculator, investor to go after a $50 or a $60 or a $70,000 Tiffany lamp. But those who have done it have profited in the last 10 to 20 years, even with some of the downturns in some of these markets due to the overall condition of the economy. So it's just something to keep in your mind. Some of these markets are still spiking in the top 1 to 3% of these collecting categories. Number 4 on the list is art pottery. Again, this goes a little bit with art glass. There's a lot of people that will eventually discover art pottery in their later years, meaning I have friends now that are in their late 40s, early 50s. They're starting to get into art pottery, art glass, going after some of this more esoteric stuff, because due to the Great Recession, a lot of these prices have declined, and it has presented a buying opportunity for some people. The problem is, we don't know when the market for some of these items is going to turn around. With art pottery, it's kind of hard to tell, because there's so many different makes of art pottery, whether we're talking about rookwood or rosewood or the like, to the point where I could do an hour video on all the different makes of art pottery, and we would pretty much be here all day. Same thing's true to a lesser extent with art glass, but art glass just has more of an appeal, in my opinion, to a lot of contemporary collectors than art pottery does. But that market will never die. It is one of the mainstays of the antiques trade, and people still seek it out. People still collect it. If you want a name of an auction house that deals in both art glass and art pottery, Cowan's Art Auction House out of Ohio deals in both art glass and art pottery. So you can go on that site, you can look through completed auction listings, and you can learn this stuff for yourself. Next, and last but not least, the market for antique furniture. Now, we got to spend a little bit talking about this. So if you're really not into antique furniture, or you don't want to hear what I'm going to say, you can shut this video off, because this is the last collecting category on this bear market list that I'm going to be going over in this particular video. The market for antique furniture always changes. It is related to both collecting trends, decorator trends, and also, to a lesser extent, guys, pop culture-based trends. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I'm not going to go into all the definitions that I know about antique furniture, whether we talk about the Federal period or the Gothic period or the Victorian age. I'm going to keep this very simple so that anybody can follow along. If you go back to the 1990s or even the late 1990s, there are a lot of movies coming out like Interview with a Vampire, Blade, the Marvel comic book character, Blade, Underworld. Well, all these particular movies at the time featured a lot of awesome Gothic and Victorian furniture that's reminiscent of the vampire age, or how vampires would live if they were real characters and or people at present day. I shouldn't say people, because vampires wouldn't be alive, but you know what I mean. That particular period time and those pieces of furniture were very hot back in the early 1990s all the way up through the late 1990s. Then that period for Gothic and Victorian furniture died off. People stopped pursuing those pieces. What came into vogue next was mid-century modern. Now, if you don't know what mid-century modern furniture is, simply watch an episode of Mad Men or Downtown Abbey. Those particular shows feature a lot of different pieces of mid-century modern furniture. The market for mid-century modern furniture is very hot even to this day as we prepare to enter the year 2020 and beyond. I don't see it softening anytime soon, but I will say prices are a little lower across the board than they were just 2 or 3 years ago. So there is a little bit of weakening of that market, but that's considered norm for antique furniture and even vintage furniture collecting overall. Now, a lot of people ask me, what about brown furniture? If you don't know what brown furniture is, overall, brown furniture is a category of antique furniture, and even to a certain extent vintage furniture, that lumps all the different antique and vintage wood styles together, because a lot of this furniture was big and bulky. So a lot of the pieces in the top 1 to 5% of the market go for insane amounts at auction. The DuPont family owns a lot of brown furniture, because these are the traditional antique furniture pieces that you see in movies that were pretty much made to show the era of the late 1700s, the early 1800s, even up to the Civil War. Those type of pieces of furniture that are big and bulky, made out of mahogany or cherry or pine, or a lot of those woods that have weight to them and value. Walnut's another popular wood that's used to make those particular pieces, or oak even. Well, that market pretty much at present time is in a bear market. So a lot of people ask me, when's the market for brown furniture going to come back? Well, if you wait 10, 20, 30, could take 40 years, that market will eventually come back in vogue, because the antiques marketplace is cyclical. A lot of these different categories, whether we're talking Gothic furniture or mid-century modern or Art Deco or brown furniture and the like, they go out of vogue. Then 10, 20, 30, 40 years later, they come back into vogue and people start seeking it out and collecting it. Antique furniture is not for everybody. The pieces are big, they're bulky, they're hard to consign to auction houses. If you're going to put money in that collecting category, it has to be because you love the items overall, first and foremost. Investing in those items is pretty much for the people that can come into that market and buy up the top 1 to 10% of the top tier market. So for instance, if you look at certain auction houses, you'll see certain pieces of brown furniture and antique furniture that even to this day are still selling for $50,000 or more. It's just, that's the top tier of the market. So the DuPont family, or somebody of their stature who's looking to buy a true original antique that's time period authentic, they're going to go after an item that costs $50, $60, $70, $100,000. They're going to buy the best that they can afford, because it also serves as a way to diversify assets. Because again, guys, they're buying at the top tier of the market. So one of the things you got to understand with a lot of these collecting categories is they will always exist. They will always be collected. They will always be coveted. The thing that we cannot predict is sometimes how these markets move. Because something like antique furniture, you can have the market in an overall bear market, but then you can have a category like mid-century modern that's pretty much going big gangbusters at auction. So it's very hard to predict the movements within the antique furniture collecting category overall when compared to coins, currency, and even art glass. Art pottery is a little unpredictable in my opinion too. That market can be a little bit viewed as unstable. So can certain segments of the art glass collecting market. Like if you're looking at more esoteric brands and makers like Lotz versus Tiffany. Tiffany obviously is the brand name in that particular market. So I hope this video has served you well. It's pretty much 26 minutes now. I'm sorry that this video was so long. If there's any comments you have for me, please leave them in the comment section. Like, subscribe. Feel free to leave me any negative feedback if it's done in a respectful manner that you may have towards this particular video. I may just respond, and I may literally read your comment, and it may come up in a future video. Thanks, guys, and have a great day.